Well, the first question can be, how is the situation now in the village, if you know, if you follow up the situation?
Well,
Can I just say one quick thing, and then Ruby will have more details, but you know, as documentary filmmakers, you always hope to have impact and have something really happen as a result, and most of the time it's a little hard to figure out what impact your film had, but in this case it was not hard at all. Ruby, tell the story.
after the film was actually shown, it was shown on the internet at the Yale Environmental website. And so, and then after the film got, luckily got nominated. And so the government, the local government was very concerned about the press being there.
They were very worried that we were going to win an Oscar. that we were nominated, that was bad enough, but what were they going to say if we won?
Yeah.
So just in those 2-week period, after the nomination and before the Academy Awards, they didn't have to worry, by the way, we didn't win, but they didn't know that, so.
So there was a big announcement in the Chinese press, someone actually forwarded to us, and they said they're going to spend 30 million US actually to clean up the place, the river, and also they did clean it up, actually it's very nice now, and also they also cleaned up the factory. It's, they put grass and stuff in. And then I heard that it's very livable. Like I mean, Zhang Onli is quite happy with it. The main character, the farmer.
Because we had been very lucky to win an Oscar, the two of us, 3 years before, and so I think there was real fear that maybe we were going to win again, and so. So they had to do something really fast. So we started hearing about these meetings that were taking place in the village and so forth. It's fantastic. You know, you dream as a filmmaker. It doesn't happen maybe once or twice in a lifetime where the impact is just that immediate and that absolute. And you know, there are, it just was an incredible, incredible feeling.
How did you hear about the situation in the village, and at what point did it compel you to make a documentary about it?
After the Oscar in 2007, I was being approached by an NGO and say there's something happening in this area. And also we're doing a lot of public health issues in China, and after the HIV/AIDS project, we want to move into environmental issues, and also we were very lucky to have received funding. Basically with the funding, just do anything about the environment, especially water issues. So and you know, at that time in China, there was a flourishing of NGOs and civil society, and that was a great time from 2007 and up to 2009. It was a great time, great opportunity for filmmakers, journalists to go into China because of the Olympic.
Then we ask about the lecture.
So having the struggle between, you know, suggesting them to take some actions and also like not, you know, maintaining the documentary style and like not actually interfering, like there's a struggle because you know that eventually nobody's going to take action. So how much influence or control do you think you guys sort of imposed in leading the story to where it was? Or was it just like them doing everything by their own will and them, you guys not having any control or influence over what they did?
It's a very good question.
I was just going to say it's a great question.
Actually, the film took, even though it's only 49 minutes, it took 3 years because in a campaign like that, okay, it just we'll just have to wait and wait it out. And so we started in 2007, and the film was finished in 2010, or 2011. So it just have to we just wait it out. We have no interference. But of course, like Tom said earlier, the camera cameras were there, and so it motivated the farmer, the villagers, to take action. So we were there for a long time, and so they was really take us seriously, and that they think we were going to help them, but in fact we didn't help them.
Well, except that the company knew that there was a camera around, and the rumor went around that it was a CCTV person. And so that rumor, which, believe you, the villagers did nothing to dispel, because they were very happy to have that rumor around, and so that provided some protection. And you know, it actually ties in with the earlier discussion we were having about the lecture, the idea of cinema verite, of just being a fly on the wall, and it's impossible, because the presence of a camera played a role in restraining the behavior of the companies, because they felt like, you know, they didn't restrain themselves entirely, but they were a little bit held back by the camera, so the camera was helpful. That was not our intention, but it happened.
And also it give the village, the farmers a little more motivation. And so when you see the thumb signing, because the camera was there, and they was very, very excited about it. And so, I mean, it's because nobody, you know, would go in and stay such a long time, and the cameraman became friends with the farmer, and in fact the farmer still WhatsApp me and saying, well, we have a problem here, would you send the cameraman and do something? That was a year ago.
And actually, when we started the work, we didn't know how far we were going to be able to go, and it was only after the signing with the thumbs that we looked at this and we said, we have a film here, we have to keep moving. So we were also playing it a little bit cool, in the sense of like, is there a story here? Are we going to have enough access to be able to tell a story? And it was only after that village meeting that we made the commitment to go ahead. We should also ask, by the way, well, let's have one more question or so about the film, but if we're happy to keep talking about that, but if there's any questions or arguments or critiques or whatever of the discussion we were talking about narration versus non-narration, those questions are welcome as well.
Sequel? No.
How much money do you have?
Hi, I have a question, first of all, about one detail in the film. Like, in the beginning, there was an old lady,
Yeah.
and she said, she was murmuring, and she said, don't film this, and don't show this, but of course it was filmed and it was shown here publicly.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, did you have any communication afterwards, where
Yeah.
is it, and
Yeah,
is it a
yeah.
breach of, against her will?
No, actually, it's she at first didn't want to be filmed, but then later on, she's like one of the most voice advocates of the film, and she took us to the polluted place, and later on she keep talking, and we can't stop her talking. So I mean, you see the progression of her as well, being a participant in this campaign, a very active role.
So, but for that part, it's about her family member.
Yeah, but actually, she's okay with it, and in fact, it's funny that that later on, when this film got shown on the internet, and they somehow, the factory guy who visited Qiugang, it's the first one who discovered the link, and they told everyone in the village, and then the people would see on the computer, and they will close the computer, be afraid that the government is going to, like, you know, anytime delete the link, and so, you know, then the whole village was really kind of applauding her for being so brave to speak out. So I mean, they all, I mean, that's it. They all signed the releases. They all agree to the film, and it's not a breach of trust at all. Yeah. But that's the question that everybody asks at the end of the film. So, but anyways, should we talk about early on about the narrated versus non-narrated film?
We don't have to. It's just if there are, wherever the conversation wants to go.
Oh yeah, here is a question. I have a question which is kind of general and it might apply to all the documentary. So I was wondering, like, do you guys follow up the questions in this village after you finish the documentary? I mean, like, it has been 5 years since you finished it. Like, do you still like pay attention to problems afterwards, which is related to the problems in the documentary?
Can I answer that a little bit? Which is, documentary filmmakers work really hard, and documentary filmmakers get very involved in a situation and try to put that and dramatize that situation, and then their work is done, and then before you know it, they're working incredibly hard on the next thing, and so over time, in some cases, those contacts remain, and friendships remain, and communication remains, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's a complicated thing because you jump into a situation and suddenly you're incredibly intimate with a person or a situation or whatever, and you're really, really deeply involved. But you're also a professional. It's almost like a doctor who, cuts somebody open and pulls out one thing and puts back another thing, and they're just involved in life and death, and then they sew them up, and then they go on. They move on to the next thing. And I've come over time to be reconciled to the idea that I mean, certainly we followed with great excitement, huge excitement, the fact that this cleanup was taking place. And I followed it for maybe 2 years or 3 years through Ruby, and then I didn't, I was busy. No, I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not defending that. I'm just saying it's a fact of life that you can't possibly sustain the intensity of the relationship that you had.
Well, in the case of the Blood of Yingzhou District, I still remain friends, sometimes enemy, with the lady who was the caretaker of the HIV children. So it's been more than 10 years, 12 years. So 2 years or 3 years ago, I went back and did a follow-up on the children. So I put it on the web, and so I know a lot of people would like to know the situation of the children. So it's available. I mean, seldom you have that kind of relationship with a subject for such a long time, but in that case, because there were a lot of people were so saw the film and really concerned about the children. So I also I felt really responsible for going back and really tell the situation of the children 10 years later.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the sharing. And Thomas, you mentioned, is that okay?
Can we? All right. You mentioned you will somehow dramatize the movie a little bit just when you answer the questions just now. And then secondly, you mentioned when you see this the signature, the signing, and then the fingerprint, then you know there's a story. So my question is, first, how would you define or draw a line when you're following the people for so long? How would you decide, okay, this is a story and we're gonna continue pursuing it without too dramatize it? Because if you're a documentary, you should not put in too much dramatic moments in it, right? How would you tell a story by being as subtle as possible?
No, I first of all, I'm not sure that there's two different questions here. One is, when do you decide to keep going and commit to a film? Like the film that I've been working on recently in the United States. I started filming and started filming and started filming, and I didn't make a commitment to the film for a while, and then I made the commitment. And a film is an unbelievable amount of work, and it's also quite costly, and so you want to, and nowadays it's not so expensive to film a little bit, so by filming a little bit and exploring and then making sure that the film is strong enough, there's no science to that moment, but there is a moment where you sort of know, yes, this is something that's important and I should keep going. I'm not sure that I've ever started a project, and I don't think I've ever started a project and just abandoned it, but I've retained the right to do that. You know, in other words, like when I said in this most recent story, when I went out to Cleveland where it was taking place in Ohio, I said to the guy, I'm not promising you I'm going to make this film, but I want to start, I want to explore it. And then about 2 months later I said, I'm making this film. So I don't know why there comes that moment where you know, but you know. In terms of the second question, you were concerned about dramatizing too much. That's some of the hardest questions that exist in documentary film. You know, there are, first of all, just as a realistic statement, there is, for us as a public, as a viewing public today, there's unbelievable amount of choices about what we're going to watch. And the viewer has become quite impatient and expects, if a viewer is not engaged, they're going to move on. And so if you're trying to represent a story like this, you work hard to try to make it as interesting as possible so that people will watch it and so that the film will have the impact that you hope that it has. And then where do you draw that line? Where are you pushing it too hard? And that ends up being, I think, a very human decision that you have to feel. One of the sort of tricks that I play on myself is, let's say that I'm doing something that's pushing the drama up. I say, well, how would I feel if everybody who's watching the film knew that I had done that? How would I feel if a reporter from a newspaper called me up and said, listen, I know your film has had a lot of success, but is it true that you added music here where there wasn't any, or that you used this person's sentence over here when he was talking about it over there, whatever. Am I comfortable with everybody knowing what I'm doing? If I'm comfortable with everyone knowing that what I'm doing, then I'm going to go ahead and do it. If I'm sort of embarrassed, then I don't. It's not a science, but it's a device that I use for myself.
Thank you for producing this impactful documentary. I'm just interested, whether this documentary is shown in other parts of China and whether it will be censored.
Well, it was available for, I think, 3-4 months online, and nobody, shut off the link. And then, this last 2 years has been very difficult. I don't think people can find this film in China anymore. Whereas the Blood of Yingzhou District, you can still find the link and a private copy online. And split up in sections, not entire film, but it was split up in 5 or 6 sections. I think it's getting harder and harder in China the last couple of years about this subject, because it's citizen participation about, protest. It's a very sensitive subject now. Not from the same. I think we'll give. Any?
Oh, right.
Hi, thank you for sharing everything with us. To link the film and the narration together, in this particular film you've chosen to use...
I know it doesn't illustrate any of the things that I was talking about, does it?
Well, so yeah, I wanted to ask, in your view, for example, how does that differ from... Would it have been different if it would have been a voice narrating the story? What effect did that have, according to your idea?
Yeah, it's another really, really good question. And we were accumulating all of this footage, and we knew that it was a complicated story and that it played out over time and that we would not be able to do it entirely verite, that we would need something. So we toyed with the idea of, could it be Ruby in the first person, sort of recollecting how she found this situation? Could it be that? We decided against that, and the cards, it's dramatically very different. The cards kind of frame you and give you a context in which to understand the situation, but in a very neutral, anonymous way. So they're just sort of, they allow you to orient yourself as to what is going on. Whereas if we had done, say, a first-person piece in which Ruby said, you know, I first got a call in December of 2006, and it was somebody asking me da-da-da, then Ruby would have become more of a character in the film, and then, you know, you would have had to sort of, you would either feel connected or not to that. We ultimately decided that cards and a more neutral approach, but I think the difference is one is more personal and one is more neutral. That would be the short answer, yeah.
Actually, a lot of people put cards in a way it's kind of smartly replacing the narration as well, right?
That's sort of a pretty standard thing now, is that you put in a few cards and that becomes a substitute for a narrative voice. It's a substitute for the classic narrative voice, but it's not a substitute for the other kinds of voices we were talking about. One more. We can do one more, if there is one.
Well, in addition to that, I was surprised that it seemed like the most dramatic events were covered in animation, and that like it seemed like they would call you, this happened, and you would go and kind of had to reinvent the event as opposed to like be there when it's really happening.
Can I say something about that? That's true, but what's also true is that there's been almost never a film where a grassroots movement has been covered within China. I mean, in other words, that's a really hard thing to do. And in fact, it was so delicate that I never went on location, and many, many times Ruby did not go on location. She just sent the cameraman there. So in other words, yes, we did miss a lot of things, but we also captured something that's very, very rare to capture on film. I don't mean to sound defensive, but I guess I am.
Well, now you see Wukong, and that's really, we were the first people that doing citizen participation. I think at that time, after the film was made, then the series of protests went on about the environment. And I don't mean we are the pioneers, but people don't cover that kind of stuff. And I know that one of the participants had a film about Wukong here. So that's like just recently, that's the last 2 years. So we were like pretty much ahead of of the curve in covering that. And
but you're right that we were dependent upon being invited, and we also were very mindful, and this is an ethical thing, of not wanting to cause trouble. So we really felt like we were guests of the village, and if they didn't invite us, we missed things.
Actually, the guys, the Zhang Gongli is very smart. Anything happen, they would just like happen and then call us. Or luckily he has 2 photographs, and in fact, even photographs were rare because, in fact, we gave him a camera and he didn't shoot it because it's too dangerous. I mean, also as a villagers, they're not sophisticated. It's like camera, and also. Later on, I found out that he was under watch by the security anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
One.
And it's just very lucky that in this movie, you guys success in like helping out the village to shut down the factory. But like in your director's life, have you ever, like, your existence actually make things worse? Have you ever encountered a situation like that?
No.
Not really. Okay.
Actually, no. I think, I mean,
Yes, but I can think of many instances where there are many unintended consequences of a documentary being filmed and people's lives being changed in ways that are, particularly if a documentary suddenly makes somebody famous, and that can have all kinds of unexpected ripple effects. The more successful the film, the greater the danger that there is of that. That's something that one cannot control, but it is something that one thinks about. And particularly if the person is young, I think you have to think about it especially hard, because they're not really in a position to decide.
Well, the farmers once told me he's a very intelligent guy. He's only have a junior high education. He said, I'm at the edge of the knife, but if I'm famous, then I have protection. Very wise. So, well, any more question about, the earlier talk about narration was no narration? I mean, if you guys decided on making a film, would that, this is the new approach is like no narration, right? That's the thing.
That's the orthodoxy these days, yes.
Hi, thanks for coming, showing us your film. I'm very interested in one point that you mentioned in earlier conversations where you say you would only do things that you would feel comfortable when showing to other people. I mean, the back end of the production process. What I'm interested in is how far would you go in rearranging or editing the dialogues of your interviewees or the subjects that you shoot? Would you allow yourself to rearrange them in terms of time sequence? I mean, chronologically and stuff like that. How would you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, and the temptations are always there, and sometimes you feel that they're justified, and sometimes they're not. The reality of documentary filmmaking today is that there are no, there's journalism is over here, right? Classic journalism is over here. Classic documentary filmmaking traditions are over here, and they overlap somewhat. There's an area where they overlap, but they're also very different. And again, the dogma in documentary film is to say, I'm an artist, I can do whatever I want because I'm a creative artist. And I don't accept that. I think that you are at least a craftsperson. If you're not an artist, you're at least a craftsperson. But you have chosen to work in non-fiction, which is different from fiction, and you do not have a full freedom, I believe. And the problem then is getting to define exactly where those lines are. And there is really nothing to guide you. I mean, when I started out in a network, a kind of conventional network many years ago, there were rules. There was this big, thick black book, and you leaf through it, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, and I am allowed to do that, and everybody told you, and they were unbelievably restrictive. And it made filmmaking, the danger was that you were going to be very boring a lot of the time because you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you couldn't do this. And but in independent documentary, there are no such rules. And in fact, if you followed that big, thick black book, nobody would ever see your film ever because you couldn't even get the person. You missed them walking out the door. You can't even say, oh, excuse me, could you walk out the door again? You can't do anything like that. And so it's really impossible to make a good film that way. And so I come back to this simple rule. Am I embarrassed by what I'm doing? Am I? And I've always wanted and dreamt of a website where it's like not a confession website, but it's just a public website where you said, this person refused to give me an interview unless I paid for their bus to come to and from the place. So I gave them $30 US, or else I wasn't going to get the interview. And you post that. And this time, this thing was said here, and this thing was said here, but actually I put them together and made it sound like they were sounding there. And then you just list all that stuff. And then that way the viewer can decide whether they still trust you or not. Because that's really what it's about. Have you done something that violates the trust in the subject or violates the trust with the viewer? And if you're willing to absolutely lay out every trick that you used in the making of that film, then the viewer at least is protected. The viewer can decide then, do they buy the story or not? I think transparency is the only answer. Unfortunately, there is no such website. And there's a film that I'm making right now where I took certain significant artistic liberties. I'll take 1 second and to quickly describe what they are. They don't speak directly to your issue, but they speak to the issue of artistic liberty. So I was following a class of students who all actually had all come out of prison, and I was following that period for 6 months, right? But it was, as with your situation, there were many things that I missed because it was in a city far away from me. It was 800 miles, 600 miles from where I lived to where the school was, and so there were key things that I missed. Now I'm editing the film and I feel that I'm missing these things. So now we're in class 2 or class 3. So I took shots of class 2 or class 3 and I'm putting them into that first 6-month chronology because the same things happened in the class 1 as happened in class 3, but some of the faces are different and so on. I don't really love doing it. I wish I don't have to do it. Nobody is holding a gun at my head and making me do it. I want to do it because it makes the film better. It makes the film more watchable. It makes the film more interesting. But I also know that the viewer actually has no way, by looking at the film, has no way of knowing that I've done that. So what I'm thinking of doing is just putting in the credits. So, produced by, directed by, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, by the way, we took certain artistic liberties in this film. Here's what we did. Because I want the viewer to know. I don't think it affects the credibility of the film at all. I just want the viewer to know so that the viewer can decide for themselves. I don't have a place or a way to do that. I wish I did.
Thank you. I'll sleep a lot better tonight.
well, I have to. I was spending a couple of days with James Alani, and the way he shot his film, because he spent like 200 days in a place. So he shot in a classroom, and he shot it as if it happened in one day or one weekend. In fact, because he's working by himself, he has to go back and when he's editing, he has to go back and do the close-up reaction shot of the students in another day or in the same blue shirt. So that's not narration, but it's also telling, the filmmaker's version of the reality of that day. So, it's, after all, filmmaking or a documentary is really the reality, capture a reality of the filmmaker, actually. In a way, using fiction or the real person, right?
There's a great term that's used in fiction filmmaking. And let's say that I'm shooting a close-up, I'm shooting a wide shot of Ruby and me. And now I'm shooting the close-up, and in the close-up, Ruby doesn't look like she's in the same position. So then they say, okay, let's make Ruby move a little bit here so that the two shots look consistent. The term that is used for that is cheat. And that's an absolutely professional term in Hollywood. Okay, let's cheat the table 3 inches over that way, and then cheat. Cheat. So we are all, as documentary filmmakers, we are cheats. And then the question is, can we defend the cheats that we make? Are they important cheats, or are they just helpful cheats? Are they important in the sense of, by moving Ruby in this direction to make the close-up fit so it looks like it's the same wide shot, is that something that destroys the credibility of the film or not? I don't want to do anything that destroys the credibility of my film, but I want to make as good and as impactful and as dramatic a film as I possibly can. Absolutely. And so that's a tension that we all live with all the time. And I would love to have a public way so that any viewer who's saying, wait a minute, did he really say all those things in the same order? And they just go log on to truth.com, you know, and then they go, oh yeah, no, this thing was taken from this date, this thing was that date. I don't believe that film anymore. Oh, I see. Oh, I believe that film. You know.
Well, Tom holds a very high standard of credibility, but nowadays I think people watch so much reality TV and there's like manufactured truth.
Yeah.
How do you distinguish that?
And the viewer doesn't really, the viewer has now become so knowledgeable about how a film is made that they would be astonished if you didn't do those things, you know? Because they're probably making a documentary film themselves, you know, because everybody is making a documentary film. So, you know, the people know the craft, and the viewer's relationship to that craft is very different than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And the expectations are different. And the flip side of that is the drama expectations are also different. They want a really satisfying dramatic experience. And so you know, it pushes you. It pushes you in the sense of, okay, God, I didn't get that. I missed that. How can I know what? I'm gonna ask this guy, he's not actually doing this anymore. I'm gonna ask him if he wouldn't mind to come back and do this thing one more time so that I can film it, and I'm gonna put it in as if I got it the first time. It's cheating. It's, quote, cheating. But have you violated the core story? And that's the question. And the only way I answer that is, am I embarrassed by what I'm doing? The truth is, a little bit. So make it public and let people decide.
Well, with that, any more questions?
You know, I'm sorry, one last thing. Errol Morris, we were talking before about cinema verite, and Errol Morris, who's a great documentary filmmaker who did The Fog of War and other really great films, he said, yes, well, they say that Jean-Luc Godard said that film is truth 24 times a second. And he was close, but he just got one little thing wrong. It's actually lies 24 times a second. So,
well, I'm
not saying that's, but in other words, the thing of like drama, truthfulness, creating drama, and you know, and how you reconcile all those things is a big question.
Well, I think the fiction and non-fiction film, the lines blurring more, you know, really a lot in the last couple of years, because, you know, the accessibility of media on, you know, YouTube, and it's like people are so used to, you know, images, and sometimes that line is really blurry.
And it's also affected the subjects, because the subjects are very media literate. So that, you know, you'll be filming somebody and they'll say, oh, did you get what you need there? Do you want me to do any part of that again? Or, you know, in other words, because they're in on the process, and that's what you see in reality TV, where the subject is really producing the drama. Some of it under instruction from the producer, and some of it because they just understand the drill. You know, let me have a big fight here because the camera is here and that'll get me screen time, you know.
Well, with that...
Yeah, that's a dark note to end on. I don't want to end on that.
No. Well, we're still making...
we still care a lot about telling the story true. I just want to make that clear. It's complicated.
Yes, so with this complicated world and complex reality, so should we give Tom a big hand to thank you for, this is our last, for this year.